Rohan sat in his private room on the top floor of the city's biggest hospital. The room had everything: luxury furniture, wide windows showing the skyline, and nurses who entered with quiet steps whenever the machines beeped. But even with all this wealth, the air inside felt heavy. Rohan was not just any man, he was the richest businessman in the city, known everywhere as the steel-heart billionaire. Yet his heart was weaker than ever, and the doctors had no answers left. At only 40 years old, Rohan had built an empire of companies, hotels, and factories. He had everything people dreamed of: cars, mansions, and influence. But behind the strong face he showed the world, his body was falling apart. For months, he had been fighting a strange illness that drained his strength day by day. The best doctors from across the world had been flown in. They had tried every medicine, every test, and every treatment, but nothing worked. His friends visited less now, and even his business partners looked at him with hidden fear, as if his sickness was contagious. The media whispered about his downfall, and the headlines spoke of the empire that might collapse if he didn't recover. Rohan often sat in silence, staring out of the window at the people walking freely on the streets below. They seemed happy in their ordinary lives, while he, with all his money, could not even walk without pain. One evening, after the doctors left, his childhood friend Imran entered the room. Unlike others, Imran didn't wear a suit or bring business reports. He simply pulled a chair closer and looked at Rohan with soft eyes. "You look tired," Imran said gently. Rohan gave a weak smile. "Tired of fighting. The doctors, they don't say it directly, but I know they have given up." Imran hesitated, then leaned closer. "There are things beyond doctors, Rohan. Sometimes help comes from places we don't expect." Rohan frowned. "What do you mean?" "There's a girl I've seen near the old market street," Imran explained. "She's homeless. People call her Mira. She has nothing, not even a proper roof to sleep under. But I've seen her help others in strange ways. Old women with pain in their legs, sick children with fevers, after sitting with her, they say they feel lighter, healed." "It sounds foolish, I know," but Rohan cut him off with a tired laugh. "You think a homeless girl can do what the richest doctors in the world cannot?" Imran didn't smile back. "I don't think, Rohan. I believe. Sometimes the poorest carry gifts that money cannot buy." The billionaire leaned back against the pillows, closing his eyes. His chest hurt, and every breath felt heavier than the last. For a moment, he wanted to dismiss his friend's words as nonsense. But something deep inside stirred. Maybe it was despair, maybe hope, maybe the truth that money had already failed him. Later that night, when the hospital was quiet and the city lights twinkled like stars below, Rohan whispered to himself, what if she really can help?" The next morning, against the advice of his doctors, Rohan asked Imran to take him to the old market street. Wrapped in a long coat, supported by 2 guards, and with Imran by his side, he left the hospital for the first time in weeks. The market was noisy and crowded, filled with colors, smells of food, and voices bargaining. People turned their heads as they saw the billionaire, but he ignored them. His eyes searched for the girl. Near the corner of a broken wall, sitting on a piece of cloth, was Mira. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark brown skin touched by the sun, and long hair tied back simply. Her dress was faded blue, worn out from time, but her face carried a quiet calmness, as if the world's struggles could not touch her soul. In her hands, she held a small tin cup of water, which she offered to a coughing child. The child's mother thanked her with tears, saying her son felt better already. Mira only smiled gently and whispered, "It is not me. It is the prayer in the heart." Rohan stopped a few steps away, watching carefully. For the first time in months, he felt something stir inside: not pain, not fear, but curiosity. How could a girl with nothing bring comfort to others? Imran stepped forward and spoke, "Mira, this is my friend. He is very sick. Will you see him?" Mira lifted her eyes, and for a moment, they met Rohan's. Her gaze was steady, not surprised by his expensive coat, not impressed by his fame. She only nodded slowly and said, "Every life is equal before the Creator. Sit, and let me listen." Rohan's guards looked uncomfortable, and one of them whispered, "Sir, this is dangerous. She is no doctor." But Rohan raised his hand, silencing them. With effort, he lowered himself onto the cloth beside her. The market noise faded in his ears as he waited. Mira closed her eyes, placing her hands lightly near his arm, not touching but close enough to feel his trembling. Her lips moved in silent prayer. For the first time in a long while, Rohan felt a strange peace spreading through him. It was not medicine, not science, but something he couldn't explain. In that moment, he realized this meeting might change everything. The market around Rohan buzzed with noise, but inside his heart there was an unfamiliar silence. Mira's eyes were closed, and her lips moved with soft prayers only she could hear. The billionaire sat still, almost forgetting his weakness, almost forgetting the pain that had lived inside his body for months. When she finally opened her eyes, she spoke in a calm voice, "Your illness is deep, but it is not only of the body. Your heart carries a weight heavier than your sickness." Rohan blinked at her words. "The doctors say my condition is rare. They speak of organs and blood, but not of weight in the heart." "What do you mean?" Mira's gaze was steady. "Sometimes, the soul grows tired before the body does. When the soul is tired, no medicine can heal. But if the soul finds light again, the body follows." Rohan wanted to argue, but his voice caught in his throat. For so long he had lived with emptiness, with walls built around his life. Money, power, respect, he had all of it. Yet happiness had slipped away from him long before the sickness came. He realized he could not even remember the last time he had smiled without pretending. Imran leaned closer and whispered, "Rohan, maybe listen to her. What do you have to lose?" Rohan looked back at Mira. "If you believe you can help, then tell me what I must do." Mira shook her head gently. "I am not the one who heals. Healing comes from the one who made us all. But sometimes, we must open doors inside ourselves to let that healing enter. For you, the first step is to give." Rohan frowned. "Give? I have donated millions to charities. Is that what you mean?" Mira's smile was faint but kind. "Money is easy to give when you have too much. But true giving is when you share yourself, your time, your heart. You are surrounded by walls of wealth, but people outside those walls hunger for more than food. They hunger for kindness." The words struck him harder than he expected. He had always been praised for his donations, his charity foundations, his grand gifts. But now he wondered, had he ever truly given anything of himself? Before he could answer, Mira stood and walked toward the coughing child again. She gave the boy a piece of bread from her small bag and stroked his hair with gentle care. The mother bowed her head in gratitude. Rohan watched closely. She had nothing, yet she gave everything. That single act touched him more than all the ceremonies of charity he had ever attended. That night, back at the hospital, Rohan could not sleep. He kept hearing her words, "Your soul is tired, true giving is sharing your heart." He thought of his empty mansion, his long dining table where he ate alone, his workers who feared him more than they respected him. The next morning, instead of asking for the doctors, he asked Imran to take him back to the market. His guards argued, but Rohan silenced them with a stern look. "I want to see her again." When they arrived, Mira was helping an old man carry water. Her small hands struggled, but she did not stop until the work was done. Rohan stepped forward. "Mira," he said, his voice softer than before, "teach me. If giving can heal, Then show me how. She looked at him with surprise, then nodded. If you are ready, come with me. Leaving behind the shiny car and the guards, Rohan followed her through narrow lanes of the old market. The streets were filled with children playing barefoot, women selling vegetables, and men fixing broken carts. The smell of spices and dust mixed in the air. Mira stopped near a small tent made of old cloth. Inside, a woman lay coughing with fever. Mira whispered, "Her family cannot afford medicine. Sit with her. Hold her hand. Sometimes healing begins with being seen, with being cared for." Rohan hesitated. His entire life, others had served him. He had never held the hand of a stranger. But slowly, he sat down. He took the woman's trembling hand into his own. Her skin was rough and hot with fever. She looked at him with weak eyes, not recognizing the billionaire, only seeing a man sitting beside her. For a long time, Rohan said nothing. He only sat there, listening to her shallow breaths. Something inside him began to shift. He felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest, not pain, not fear, but connection. When they left the tent, Rohan's steps were unsteady, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. He turned to Mira. "I don't understand. I didn't give money, I didn't bring medicine, but why do I feel different?" Mira smiled softly. "Because you gave what people truly need, your presence. Sometimes, being seen and loved is the greatest cure." Her words stayed with him all day. That evening, back in his hospital bed, Rohan noticed something strange. The pain in his chest had not vanished, but it was less sharp. He breathed a little easier. For the first time in months, he slept without nightmares. The next morning, the doctors were surprised. His pulse was stronger, his breathing steadier. "It seems your condition has improved," one doctor said, puzzled. "We don't know how, but something has changed." Rohan closed his eyes and thought of Mira. Maybe, just maybe, she was right. This was not just the beginning of healing for his body, it was the beginning of healing for his soul. The city buzzed with rumors about Rohan's condition. Newspapers reported that the billionaire had been seen walking in the old market, speaking with a homeless girl. Some mocked the news, calling it foolish superstition, while others whispered that perhaps he had found hope where the doctors had failed. But Rohan no longer cared about what the world thought. For the first time in months, he felt alive again. The pain in his chest had lessened, but more than that, his heart felt lighter. It was as if a heavy door had opened, letting in air and light he had forgotten existed. One evening, as the golden sun sank behind the tall buildings, Rohan asked Imran to drive him back to the market. His guards complained again, worried about his health and reputation, but he silenced them. "If I am to heal, it will not be behind hospital walls. Take me to Mira." When they reached the market, Mira was sitting with a group of children. She was teaching them letters by drawing in the dust with a stick. The children's laughter filled the air. She noticed Rohan approaching, but she did not stand or bow. She only smiled, as if he was another ordinary man. "You came again," she said. "Yes," Rohan admitted. "I could not stay away. Mira, yesterday, after I sat with that sick woman, I felt something I have not felt in years. Peace. I want to understand more." Mira looked at him thoughtfully. "Healing is not a trick, Rohan. It is a journey. You must walk it slowly." "Then let me walk it," Rohan replied firmly. She nodded and stood. "Come, there is something I want to show you." They walked through narrow lanes until they reached a broken building where several families lived in small corners divided by cloth sheets. Children played with sticks instead of toys, and mothers cooked simple food over fires made from wood scraps. The air was thick with smoke and dust, but the people smiled at Mira when she entered. "These are my people," Mira said softly. "They have little, but they share everything. When one has food, all eat. When one is sick, all care. Their strength does not come from money, but from love. Rohan looked around silently. He saw an old man stitching torn shoes, a woman singing to her baby, and two children carrying water together. None of them had the luxuries he owned, yet they seemed happier than he had ever been. One little girl ran up to Mira and hugged her. "Sister Mira, will you tell us a story tonight?" Mira smiled and nodded. Then she turned to Rohan. "Would you like to join us?" That evening, Rohan sat among children on the floor as Mira told them a simple tale about a bird who lost its wings but found freedom in kindness. The children clapped and laughed, their eyes bright. Rohan listened quietly, feeling something melt inside him. He realized that for years, he had lived surrounded by people, but he had never truly belonged anywhere. Here, among strangers with nothing, he felt more connected than he ever had in his mansions. After the story, one child touched Rohan's hand and asked, "Uncle, will you come again tomorrow?" Rohan's throat tightened. No one had asked him such a pure question in years. "Yes," he whispered, "I will." When they left the building, Rohan turned to Mira. "How do you do it? You have nothing, yet everyone looks at you with love. You live in hardship, yet your face is calm. What is your secret?" Mira looked up at the night sky where stars had begun to shine. "The secret is simple. I do not live for myself alone. I live for others. When you carry others in your heart, your own burdens feel lighter." Her words stayed with Rohan long into the night. Back at the hospital, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his lonely mansion, his empty dining halls, his workers who never smiled in his presence. For so long, he had believed strength came from power and wealth. But perhaps true strength came from giving without expecting anything in return. The next morning, he surprised his staff. Instead of calling for business reports, he asked to visit one of his factories. His assistants rushed to prepare, but he told them, "No formal visits. I just want to see my people." When he arrived, the workers were shocked to see him walking among them. He asked about their families, their children, their lives. At first they answered carefully, unsure why their powerful employer was suddenly speaking like a friend. But soon, one man dared to smile and said, "Sir, this is the first time you have asked about us. It means a lot." Rohan felt a strange warmth in his chest, again the same lightness he had felt in the market. That evening, the doctors examined him once more. "Your body is responding better," one of them said, surprised. "It is as if your system has found new energy." Rohan only nodded quietly. He knew where that energy had come from. It was not medicine. It was Mira's lesson. Yet deep inside, he also knew this was only the beginning. His illness was still there, and his journey was far from complete. But for the first time, he was not afraid of the path ahead. He whispered to himself, "Maybe the cure is not just for my body. Maybe it is for my soul." And so, the billionaire who once lived in isolation continued to return to the market, to the broken building, and to the homeless girl who had taught him what no doctor ever could. Days turned into weeks, and Rohan's visits to the old market became a part of his life. Each time he went, he discovered something new, something no hospital could offer. Mira never gave him medicine, never promised miracles, but her words and actions touched him in ways no doctor's advice had ever done. The world outside, however, was beginning to notice. Newspapers published photographs of the billionaire sitting among street children, sharing food with families who lived in tents, and walking beside Mira in the dusty lanes. Some people admired his change of heart, calling it inspiring. But others criticized him harshly. They said he had lost his mind, that he was wasting time with a homeless girl while his business empire was at risk. One evening, Imran brought him a pile of newspapers. "Look at this, Rohan. Your board members are restless. Investors are asking questions. They think you are becoming weak. Rohan scanned the headlines without much emotion. For years, they called me strong because I crushed competitors and doubled profits. Yet I was dying inside. If this is weakness, then I prefer it. Imran smiled faintly. He had never seen his friend speak with such calmness. Later that week, Rohan went again to the broken building where Mira's people lived. This time, he came with no guards, no assistants, no sign of wealth. He carried only a few bags of bread and fruit. When the children saw him, they ran forward shouting, "Uncle Rohan!" The sound made his heart swell. He sat among them and began to distribute the food with his own hands. Mira watched silently, her eyes thoughtful. When everyone had eaten, she sat beside him and said, "You are changing." Rohan looked at her. "Do you think I can really heal, Mira?" She paused before answering. "Your body may or may not heal fully. That is not in my hands. But your soul, yes, your soul is healing. And when the soul heals, the body often follows." Her words gave him comfort, but they also made him think deeply. For the first time, he realized that perhaps healing did not mean escaping death forever. It meant living fully while life was still his. That night, as he left the market, a thought struck him. He turned to Mira. "You live in such hardship. You have no home, no comfort. Why do you spend your life helping others instead of thinking of yourself?" Mira smiled gently. "Because I once lost everything. I know the pain of hunger, the loneliness of being unseen. When I see others suffer, I cannot turn away. Their joy becomes my joy." Rohan looked at her with new respect. In her poverty, she carried a richness that no amount of money had given him. The next morning, Rohan made a surprising decision. He called his managers and said, "Prepare funds for building small houses near the old market. The families living on the streets deserve shelter. But remember, I do not want this to be called a charity project. It is not for my name or my company. It is for them. Let the houses belong to them, not me." His managers were shocked. They tried to argue about costs and publicity, but Rohan's tone left no space for questions. Weeks passed, and the work began. The families from the broken building could hardly believe it when construction started. Small, neat homes slowly rose from the dusty ground. Children clapped and danced at the sight of walls and roofs being built just for them. Rohan visited often, walking among the workers, speaking to the families, asking the children what colors they wanted for their rooms. For the first time in years, laughter followed him wherever he went. But as the homes neared completion, his sickness returned with sharp force. One evening, while helping distribute food, his chest tightened badly, and he nearly collapsed. Mira rushed to his side, supporting him as he gasped for breath. "Rohan," she said firmly, "you must rest. You are pushing yourself too hard." Through heavy breaths, he whispered, "No, if my time is short, I want to spend it this way. Not in a bed, waiting to die. But here, among people, living." Tears welled in Mira's eyes, but she only nodded. "Then let us live each day with purpose." The next morning, the doctors were called urgently. They examined Rohan and warned, "Your condition is worsening. You must stop these tiring visits. If you continue, your life will shorten further." But Rohan shook his head. "A longer life without meaning is worse than a shorter one filled with love. I choose to live my way." The doctors left in frustration, but Imran stayed by his side. "Rohan, I don't want to lose you. But I have never been more proud of you." Rohan smiled weakly. "If I die tomorrow, I will die richer than I ever lived." Outside his window, the city lights twinkled. He thought of the children laughing, of the families soon moving into new homes, of Mira's calm smile. and for the first time, the thought of death did not frighten him. It felt almost like peace. The new homes near the old market were finally completed. What had once been broken walls and torn tents was now a small neighborhood filled with neat little houses painted in bright colors. Children ran in and out of their new rooms with joy, their laughter echoing through the lanes. Mothers wept as they touched the solid walls, whispering prayers of thanks. For the people who had lived their lives in poverty, it was more than shelter, it was dignity, safety, and hope. And for Rohan, it was something even greater. It was proof that his life, even in sickness, could still bring change. The day the families moved into their new homes, Rohan stood quietly among them. He was weak, leaning on Imran's arm for support, but his eyes shone with warmth as he watched the people celebrate. Mira stood beside him, her face calm but her eyes bright with emotion. "This is your gift," she said softly. Rohan shook his head. "No, Mira. This is our gift. You taught me what true giving is. Without you, I would still be trapped in myself." Mira smiled. "I only reminded you of what was already inside your heart. You chose to open it." As evening fell, lanterns were lit, and the families gathered in the new courtyard. Children sang songs, and elders gave short blessings. Rohan sat among them, not as a billionaire, not as a man of power, but as a simple guest. When one little boy climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly, Rohan felt tears burn his eyes. It was then that he realized something: he was no longer afraid of his illness. He no longer feared death. What he feared was leaving this newfound life unfinished. That night, as he returned to the hospital, his health took another sharp turn. His breathing grew heavier, and the pain in his chest returned with force. The doctors rushed to him, worried. After long hours of tests, one of them spoke in a grave tone. "Rohan Sahib, your condition has worsened. We can try more treatments, but we must be honest, there is little hope left." The room fell silent. Imran lowered his head, and even the nurses looked down sadly. But Rohan surprised them all. He smiled faintly and said, "Hope is not in medicine alone. I have found it elsewhere." The doctor frowned. "We understand your faith, sir, but science has its limits." "Yes," Rohan replied calmly, "and so does wealth. But love has no limits." The doctors exchanged confused looks, but they could not argue with the peace on his face. The next day, despite his weakness, Rohan insisted on visiting the new homes again. Imran tried to stop him. "Rohan, you are too sick. You must rest." But Rohan answered, "If these are my last days, I want to spend them where my heart is alive." And so, with Mira's support, he walked slowly through the lanes of the new neighborhood. Children rushed to greet him, holding his hands, guiding his steps. Women offered him simple food, and elders prayed for his health. As he sat on a bench watching the families laugh together, he whispered to Mira, "Do you see this? This is life. This is the medicine I needed all along." Mira looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Yes, Rohan. You are healing, even if the doctors cannot see it." But as days passed, his body grew weaker. His visits became shorter, his steps slower. The people noticed and began to pray for him openly. At night, candles were lit in windows, and children whispered his name in their prayers. One evening, when the sky was filled with stars, Rohan sat outside one of the houses with Mira. He looked tired, his face pale, but his eyes still carried a spark. "Mira," he said quietly, "I spent my life building towers of glass and stone, yet they gave me no peace. Now, here in these small homes, I feel richer than ever. If I must leave this world, I want to leave it like this, with love, not loneliness." Mira placed her hand near his, her voice steady. "You will not leave in loneliness, Rohan. Even if your body fails, your kindness will remain. These homes, These smiles, they will carry your name long after you are gone. Her words touched him deeply. For years, he had worried about legacy, about empire and wealth. Now he realized that true legacy was not in numbers but in lives touched. That night, back in the hospital, he drifted into sleep with a peaceful smile. The doctors were puzzled. His body was failing, yet his spirit seemed stronger than ever. The next morning, Imran visited him. "Rohan, I don't know how many days you have left, but I want you to know you have changed me too. Watching you, I understand that friendship is not just standing beside someone in health, but walking with them through their weakness." Rohan squeezed his friend's hand weakly. "Thank you, Imran. You never left me, even when I had nothing to give back. That is true wealth." As the sun rose, filling the hospital room with golden light, Rohan closed his eyes. He could almost hear the laughter of children, the voices of families, and Mira's calm words. And though his body trembled, his heart whispered, "I am ready for whatever comes." The days passed slowly, and Rohan's body grew weaker. Yet his spirit remained strong. He no longer feared the illness that had once ruled his life. Instead, he focused on the laughter of children, the smiles of families, and the simple acts of kindness that had become his daily life. One morning, as he sat by the window of his hospital room, Rohan asked Imran, "Have the families settled into the homes fully?" Imran nodded. "Yes, Rohan. They are happier than ever. They speak of you every day, and they are grateful for everything you've done." Rohan smiled faintly. "It feels strange, to know that I have given something meaningful without expecting anything in return. Money cannot buy this." Imran placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You have changed lives, Rohan. That is more valuable than any business deal." Just then, Mira entered quietly. Her presence alone seemed to brighten the room. She walked over and gently placed her hand near his arm. "You are improving, not because of medicine," she said softly. "You are healing because your heart is at peace." Rohan looked at her with gratitude. "I never thought peace could feel like this." "It is stronger than any treatment, Mira." She smiled. "It is the medicine of the soul, Rohan. It works slowly, but it works deeply." The days continued in this quiet rhythm. Rohan spent mornings visiting the neighborhood, afternoons talking to Mira, and evenings resting in the hospital. Even though his body grew fragile, his heart felt lighter than ever before. One afternoon, as he walked slowly through the lanes of the small neighborhood, a young boy ran up to him. "Uncle Rohan," the boy shouted, holding a small plant in his hands. "We planted this for you. It is a tree of thanks." Rohan knelt beside him, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, little one. This tree will grow strong, just like the hope you all carry in your hearts." The boy smiled brightly and ran off to play with his friends. Rohan watched them, realizing that these moments, small and ordinary, had become the most precious parts of his life. That evening, Mira invited Rohan to sit with her near the new homes. Children played around them, and the families waved as they walked by. "Rohan," Mira said, "you have changed. You used to live behind walls of fear and loneliness. Now, you are part of something bigger than yourself." Rohan nodded. "I have learned that life is not about what you own, but what you give. Without you, Mira, I would have remained trapped in my own world." She shook her head gently. "I only guided you. The rest came from your own willingness to open your heart." As night fell, the stars began to shine, casting a soft glow over the small neighborhood. Rohan felt a deep calmness in his chest. The pain had not completely disappeared, but it no longer frightened him. He realized that the joy he had given to others was now returning to him, filling his heart with warmth and hope. The next morning, a sudden weakness overcame him. His breathing grew labored, and his hands trembled. Imran rushed to his side, calling the nurses urgently. The doctors arrived and examined him carefully. His body is failing, one said quietly. We need to act immediately. Rohan shook his head. No, there is no need for more treatments. I have found something greater than medicine. Imran looked at him with worry. Rohan, please, we need to try. Rohan placed a hand on Imran's arm. I am not afraid anymore. I have lived fully, even with the illness. My heart is at peace. Mira came closer and held his hand. You have touched so many lives, Rohan. That is your true healing. Even if your body fails, your love and kindness will remain forever. Rohan closed his eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood outside, children laughing, families talking, and the gentle wind rustling through the small trees. He remembered every smile, every moment of connection, and every act of giving. He whispered softly, I am ready to leave, if it is time. But I will leave with peace in my heart. The nurses and Imran stood silently, holding back tears, while Mira remained calm, her hand still resting near his. That night, Rohan drifted into a deep sleep. For the first time in months, he felt truly light. It was as if the weight that had pressed on him for years, the loneliness, the fear, the emptiness, had finally lifted. And in that quiet moment, he felt surrounded not by illness, but by love. The love of a girl who had nothing, the love of children who laughed freely, the love of families who now had homes, and the love he had finally discovered within himself. He knew that no matter what happened next, his life had been meaningful. For Rohan, the billionaire who had once believed wealth could solve everything, had learned the greatest lesson: true richness is found not in possessions, but in hearts touched and lives changed. And in that realization, he felt more alive than he had ever felt before. The night was quiet, and the hospital room was bathed in soft moonlight. Rohan lay in his bed, weak but calm. Mira sat beside him, her hands folded on her lap, her eyes watching over him like a silent guardian. Imran stayed close, not speaking, only offering his presence as support. For the first time in months, Rohan felt completely at peace. His body was fragile, but his mind and heart were full. He thought of the families in the new homes, of the children who had laughed and hugged him, of the simple acts of kindness that had filled his life with meaning. Mira, he whispered softly, I have lived so much in the past few weeks, more than I did in all the years of my wealth. You showed me something no medicine ever could: how to live fully. Mira smiled gently, her eyes glistening. You only needed to open your heart, Rohan. The rest came from your own courage. Rohan reached out, his hand trembling, and held hers. I wish I could have done more. There are still so many people who need help, so many lives I want to touch. Mira squeezed his hand gently. Your life has already made a difference. You have given hope, and hope is stronger than anything. Outside, the city lights twinkled, but Rohan's thoughts were not on buildings, businesses, or money. They were on people: the smiles, the laughter, the warmth of being seen and cared for. For the first time, he realized that wealth without love was empty, but love could transform even the smallest life. The next morning, Rohan woke feeling unusually calm. His breathing was easier, his chest less tight, yet he knew his body was fragile. He asked Imran to take him back to the neighborhood one last time. When he arrived, he was greeted by cheers and laughter. The children ran to him, calling his name, and the families welcomed him with simple gifts: flowers, fruits, and handmade cards. Rohan smiled weakly, feeling a warmth spread through his heart. One little girl handed him a small clay bird she had made. For you, Uncle Rohan, she said shyly. It is to remember that you taught us kindness. Rohan took the bird gently, holding it close. I will keep it forever, he said. And I will never forget you all. Mira walked beside him as they watched the families together. You see, Rohan, she said softly, this is what matters. Not power, not money, but hearts connected by care and love. Rohan nodded. Yes, Mira. I understand now. My heart feels light. For the first time, I feel complete. As the sun began to set, casting golden light over the small homes, Rohan felt a gentle peace descend over him. His body was tired, but he no longer feared the end. He had lived fully, even in the shadow of illness, and he had left behind something meaningful, a community of hope and love. That evening, back in his hospital room, Rohan closed his eyes. Mira and Imran stayed beside him, their hands resting lightly near his. He could hear the soft sounds of the neighborhood, the laughter of children, the chatter of families, the rustling of the trees he had helped plant. Rohan whispered softly, "Thank you, for showing me the real meaning of life." Mira leaned closer. "No thanks are needed, Rohan. You only needed to believe." He smiled faintly, his breath steady. In that moment, he felt a quiet joy he had never known before. He was not afraid of what would come next. His life, though short or long, had been filled with meaning, connection, and love. The next morning, the doctors checked him again. They were amazed his vitals were stable, even improving slightly. "It is remarkable," one said. "We do not know why, but he seems stronger than yesterday." Rohan simply smiled, thinking of Mira, the children, and the families. He knew the doctors could not understand the true reason. They could not measure the power of hope, kindness, and love. Weeks passed, and Rohan continued his visits, though slower now, always with Mira by his side. Each day, he helped in small ways, teaching children, listening to families, planting trees, and spreading hope. The neighborhood flourished, and so did his spirit. Though his body remained fragile, Rohan had learned the greatest lesson of all, that life is not measured by wealth, titles, or fame, but by the lives you touch, the hearts you uplift, and the love you give freely. And in that small neighborhood, surrounded by children laughing, families thriving, and a girl who had nothing yet gave everything, Rohan found what he had been searching for all his life: a heart full of peace, and a soul finally at rest. He no longer feared illness, death, or the end of his empire. He had already built something far greater, a legacy of love. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the homes, Rohan held Mira's hand and whispered, "I am ready for whatever comes, because I have lived, truly lived." And for the first time, he felt complete. The billionaire who had once believed that doctors and money could save him had discovered the greatest healing of all, not in medicine, not in wealth, but in love, kindness, and human connection. And the world, though it continued around him, seemed a little brighter because he had learned the simple truth: healing begins where the heart is open, and love is shared.